G'day cobbers, welcome back to the bush. In this episode of Lockups for All Driving, we're comparing some of the most popular can coolers on the market. The Yeti Coldster, a neoprene cover and the Brumate Hopsulator. Indoor, outdoor and in-car. First up, let's understand how your favourite beverage actually warms up. And that's conduction, convection and radiation. First up though, what is heat, or more properly termed thermal energy? Thermal energy is the kinetic energy of vibrating and colliding atoms in a substance. Conduction is the transferal of that kinetic energy from atoms at a higher state of kinetic energy to atoms at a lower state of kinetic energy. Let's give you a practical example. So if you get a 2-foot piece of aluminium rod and stick one end in the fire while holding onto the other end with your hand, they will be vibrating their little heads off those atoms in the fire, and eventually it'll go from the hot end right to the cooler end. One of two things will happen. It'll either reach a state of equilibrium where the whole aluminium rod is at the same temperature, or more likely to happen, you'll actually let go of the rod because you'll burn your hand. And next up, convection. Now convection can only happen in a fluid, be it gaseous or liquid. And what happens, the gas or liquid above the thermal energy gets less dense. The particles spread out, and because it's less dense, it travels upward. That's convection. And finally, radiation. Now, radiation is unique because it doesn't require a medium to operate. Conduction requires a solid, convection requires a fluid, whether it be air or liquid. Radiation, however, doesn't require a medium to operate. This is actually the way that we feel the heat from the sun on Earth, through the near perfect vacuum of space. So when you're feeling that campfire on your hands at night time, it's not the air in between the campfire and yourself that you're feeling that's warming up. What you're feeling is the emission of electromagnetic thermal energy from the campfire directly to your hands. And this is particularly important to us because two of our options are actually vacuum insulators. Now let's check out some material properties, but firstly, let's define some terms. Thermal conductivity. Now it's measured in watts per metre Kelvin, but that really doesn't matter for our purposes. All we need to acknowledge is it's a measure of how well a particular material is able to conduct thermal energy, or how well those atoms which are at a high level of kinetic energy are able to transfer the energy into the atoms in the same piece of material that are a low state of kinetic energy. Or let's say, for instance, you get two pieces of material, one of stainless steel and the other one of copper. You put them both into the fire, one in each hand. Which hand gets burnt first? That particular material will have the higher level of thermal conductivity. And the next term is specific heat capacity, and it's measured in joules per kilogram Kelvin. And all it is a measurement of how many joules of thermal energy are required to raise a certain mass, in this case kilograms, up 1 unit of temperature, in this case Kelvin. Now we've defined some terms, let's have a look at some material properties. Firstly, neoprene foam. You can barely see the bar chart there because it's such a good thermal insulator. Its thermal conductivity is so low at 0.036 watts per metre Kelvin, but its specific heat capacity is 1100 joules per kilogram Kelvin. What about stainless steel? Well, stainless steel comes in at 15.5 watts per metre Kelvin. It's a lot better thermal conductor, which is bad if you're trying to keep your drinks cold. And its specific heat capacity, 525 joules per kilogram Kelvin. Copper? Copper is an excellent thermal conductor, 398 watts per metre Kelvin. Specific heat capacity, 385 joules per kilogram Kelvin. And a vacuum, there we go, 0 joules per kilogram Kelvin and 0 watts per metre Kelvin. What that means is because it has no mass, it has no thermal conductivity. Because it has no mass, it has no specific heat capacity. A vacuum is a near perfect thermal insulator, and the only way to get thermal energy past a vacuum is via radiation. That's it. And let's start the testing. So you can see I've got cans in this small esky in an ice water slurry, and we'll see what temperatures that's sitting at. Should be around about 0. Okay, so it's sitting at 0.6 degrees Celsius, so just above freezing. Okay, now we've got the hopsulator here. Now the hopsulator actually comes with a freezable insert, but we won't be using that today because that'd be an unfair advantage. Well, for this test anyway. So we'll get the cans out and we'll start loading them up. That's into the hopsulator. There's one, Next one, into the Timmy Bates. He's a good bloke. Watch his channel. I'll put a link down in the doobly-doo. Neoprene cooler. And finally, the Yeti. One's in the Yeti. And we'll put the top on that one too. And of course, for any good test, you need a control. So, the fourth one being a control. Okay, so we'll crack the cans. And we'll insert the thermal couples. And then we'll press record. I'll even run for, I don't know, 6 hours. And we'll see how we go. So number one will be our hopulator. Number two will be our neoprene. Number three will be the Yeti. And finally, number four, that'll be our control. Okay, so they're all sitting down around 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. Beauty. Alright, we'll press record and we'll see you in a few hours. And there we go. That's 6 hours. So now we can stop the recording on the temperature data logger. And our temperatures are all over the place, but channel 3 seems pretty good at 13.1 degrees and channel 1 seems at about 15 degrees. Alright, let's collate the data and make a bit of a graph and see which one of these is the winner. Next up though, I want to check the freezable insert in the hopulator. So we'll do that as our next test. And here are the results for the room temperature can cooler comparison. On the left hand side here, temperature in degrees Celsius. Along the bottom here, time in minutes. First up, the Brumate. Now what I decided to do was see how long it took to get to 5 degrees Celsius. The Brumate, 51 minutes, not too bad. Let's check out Timmy Bates Neoprene. Not nearly as good, the gradient's a lot steeper. 27 minutes to 5 degrees. Obviously the less time, the worse it is. What about the Yeti? Well, the Yeti is the shallowest gradient of all three, so it's the best performing. 55 minutes to 5 degrees Celsius. A little bit better than Brumate, but a lot better than the Neoprene. And the control? Well, obviously that did the worst of all four. And the control took 17 minutes to get to 5 degrees Celsius. And now let's compare the Brumate with that frozen puck insert against our best performing can cooler, which is the Yeti. Okay, so I've put it in the freezer overnight, and as you can see, it's sitting at 0.1 degrees on the thermometer there, on the thermocouple. We'll put that into the Brumate hopulator. We'll grab a can of ice cold Coke. We'll crack that and we'll put it into the hopulator. There we go. Put the gasket on top. Seems to crossfade on me once or twice, but that's alright, it's probably just me. There we go, and it's in. Alright, let's grab the ice cold can of Coke and we'll put it into the Yeti so we have a comparison, have a decent comparison between the two. There we go, we'll bung it in the Yeti and we'll put the gasket on top of that one as well. I'm not having too much luck with these gaskets on top, screwing them in straight. Alright, so we'll put in the thermocouple probes. And now we'll press record and off we go. I'll see you in 6 hours. Alright, so it's been a little bit over 6 hours. Just got home from work, so we'll check where we're at. And looks like channel 1 is definitely better than channel 2. So let's graph and have a look at the results. Now if you're getting value out of this video so far, consider subscribing to the channel and ring that bell icon so you don't miss out on future episodes just like this one. Now if you want early ad-free access to videos just like this, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. There's a link down in the doobly-doo. Anyway, back to the episode. And here's the result for the Brumate with a frozen insert versus the Yeti. Now the reason I put the Yeti in the mix was so we have a comparison. There's a fair bit different temperature in the room while I was doing this test. I was out, there was no heater on or anything, so I threw it into the mix. On the left hand side here we've got the temperature in degrees Celsius. Along the bottom here we have the time in minutes. Firstly, let's have a look at the Brumate. Brumate got to 5 degrees in 312 minutes with that frozen insert. That's nearly 5.25 hours. Unreal. Okay, let's have a look at the Yeti. Yeti didn't completely embarrass itself. Over 2 hours to 5 degrees Celsius. But it looks like that frozen puck inside that vacuum canister is absolutely fantastic. Makes a heap of difference. And here we go, back of the car. And it's sitting around about 30 degrees Celsius in the back of the car. Okay, start loading them up. Okay, so I'll just wire them all up. I'll crack the lids first. Number 1 in the Brumate. Number 2 in the Neoprene. Number 3 into the Yeti. And finally our control, number 4. So I'll set record on the data logger and I'll see you in 6 hours. And here are the results for the in-car can cooler comparison. Now, whilst it was warm outside, it wasn't getting a lot of radiation from the sun because it was blocked by the glass, and not only the glass, but it was also blocked by the fridge. Okay, on the left-hand side here, we've got the temperature in degrees Celsius, and along the bottom here, we've got the time in minutes. First up, the Brumate. The Brumate did what I thought was pretty decent. It got to 5 degrees in 20 minutes. Neoprene, well, as to be expected, it did a lot worse than the Brumate. 2 minutes at 5 degrees. Let's have a look at the gradient of that graph there. And as you can see, there's a lot of area under that graph. That means it's doing considerably worse. What about the Yeti? Well, the Yeti had an initial spike, but then ended up slightly better than the Brumate. Not a lot in it though. Rightio, and finally our control. I think there might have been something wrong with the starting temperature of the thermocouple probe, but regardless, as you can see by the gradient of the graph, it's horrendous. In comparison with the Brumate, the Neoprene, or the Yeti. Okay, and now in the full sun test. So we'll get our cokes out of the esky. So number 1 is the Brumate. Number 2 is our Neoprene. Number 3 is the Yeti. And of course, number 4 is our control. Okay, so I'll move the esky so it's in full sun, and we'll see you in 6 hours. Now let's check out the results for the outdoor can cooler comparison. Couple of things to note. Firstly, they're all set up north-south, so they're copying the full brunt of the sun, east and west, without shading each other. Also the colour, Brumate, Neoprene, Yeti, they're all black. Reason being, I had to get consistent colours because colour affects the amount of thermal radiation they absorb. So the only colour I get all 3 in was black. So it's probably the worst colour, but it was consistent, and that's the main thing. Now on the left hand side, we've got the temperature in degrees Celsius, just like before, and along the bottom here, we got the time in minutes. First up, the Brumate. Now the Brumate got to 5 degrees in 16 minutes. Neoprene, as we'd expect, considerably worse. There's a lot more area under that curve. 5 degrees in 3 minutes. What about the Yeti? Now this will be the big teller. Yeti versus Brumate. Initially considerably worse off, which surprised the heck out of me, to be honest. And it went to 5 degrees in 4 minutes. And our control, as to be expected, the worst of the bunch, and that's horrendous. But why is the Brumate so much better than the Yeti? So which can cooler should you be grabbing? Well, unfortunately, the Neoprene ran second to last in every single test, so that's off the table. Out of these two, well, initially I was thinking Yeti first, Brumate second, right up until the last test. Now, I'll put a graphic up now. You can see that inside the Brumate, there's actually a layer of copper, and I'm assuming that's helping with the radiated thermal energy to help stop the drink warming up out in the sun. So, my preference now is Brumate than Yeti. A couple of considerations. Firstly, non-slip on the bottom, and also there's that insert. So, if you've got access to a freezer, well, you can freeze it, and if you pull it out, you can actually fit 500ml cans in there like Monster Energy and whatnot. Anyway, guys, now, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't, by all means, give it a thumbs down. Not once, not thrice, but twice. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one.